back to Dead Good Book Reviews and to another What I'm Reading Right Now video. This is week 24, I think. Welcome. It's very exciting. Or rather, it's very overwhelming at the moment. There is an awful lot on at work and outside of work at the moment, all of which is happening all at once because of course it always does. But we don't need to worry about that because there are books to talk about. As ever, I'm going to talk you through what I've read, what I'm reading, and what I'm going to be reading, and some new releases. Let's do the thing. If the thing is clean my glasses because they got dog ear cleaner on them. Since last time we spoke, I finished 4 things. I'm a little bit behind from last week, but that's absolutely fine. I first finished my reread or re-listen to Gideon the Ninth. I had a decent time with this. I like this more than when I read it physically. I think it works better as an audiobook, but it just still wasn't like blowing my mind to high heaven, having the best time. And I still lost track of things a little bit towards the end when everything kind of ramps up. I think it's just not paced the best, but I'm holding off until I've done my reread of Harrow to really get a sense of how I feel about it coming up for the next book's release. But I'm currently locked out of the script catalogue, so that'll be next week. That's the plan anyway. After that, I finished Animorphs 39, The Hidden. It was a pretty good time. There were some weird things that happened. I appreciate that's the truth in all of them, but we really are in a weird section of the series. We're late in the game, shall we say. And then I did a reread of book 2 and read book 3 for the first time of the Prison Healer series, so the Gilded Cage and the new book, which is The Blood Traitor. I've talked about Gilded Cage before, in fact fairly recently. I think that came out in 2021. Gilded Cage is a perfectly fine middle book in a series. I actually think The Blood Traitor kind of was a bit of a mess of an ending, shall we say, but in some cases I think it was so cliched and familiar and somewhat overdone, perhaps, that almost I feel like it fits more into feeling very nostalgic YA, which is one of the reasons I like the series, is it feels very familiar and kind of cheesy and yeah, all of that stuff. So in some ways, book 3, if you love that cheesy YA, we have to collect 4 items and travel around all the kingdoms that we've never really mentioned in this series so far because we were focused on one place, but now I need to finish the series off, so let's go to all the places I've thought about. Maybe. Interesting stereotypes that were brought in, like the kind of desert culture sitting on thrones that were scorpions. I don't know how I felt about some of that. So I don't think I would necessarily recommend the series if you hadn't already started it. And if you have read book 1 and 2 and you weren't such a huge fan of book 2, I don't think you need to read book 3. It's more in the same direction as where book 2 was going. Honestly, if you've read any YA trilogy and you know the vague plot of the Prison Healer, you can probably guess where it's going. You know, it's fine. I'm in the middle of 2 things. 3 if we factor in the Count of Monte Cristo, but I talked about that last week and I've not really made any significant progress on that story. I'm still reading She Who Became the Sun. I am 240 pages into that. I am enjoying this. I think I'm actually enjoying it less on a reread. I'm picking up on more of the stuff that I personally am not such a huge fan of. There's a lot of names and places and flipping back and forth between the map and the book, and I like to really sink into a story, and I'm finding I can't do that with this on a reread. It's still very good. I am by no means a negative person about this story. It's just not as good as I remember it being, which is somewhat unfortunate. But that is how the cookie crumbles sometimes. And I do remember the ending of this book being the strongest part, so I've got this much more to go and I'm excited about it. And then I'm in the middle of my reread of 6 Crimson Cranes. This is another YA book. I'm just filling my week with them this week apparently, and this is a retelling of a couple of stories combined, and I think I'm about 40% of the way through that. I'd really like to finish that today, and it's going perfectly well. Again, I think I'm liking it less on a reread because the first time I went in being like, well, this is going to be a YA retelling, I've read thousands of those, it'll be fine, and then there were a few different twists and turns that made it interesting, but that doesn't necessarily hold up then for a reread because you know those twists and turns are coming, so then it does just feel kind of generic. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. But I will report back when I've read that, and then next week I am reading The Dragon's Promise, which is the sequel, and I'm interested to see whether it's another case of the second book in the YA duology being a bit sucky. We'll find out together. This week, after that, I still have to read... Oh, I didn't even pull it off my shelves. No wonder I've not got to it yet. Well, that was something that I just did. Test of the Road, reread needs to happen. I'm hoping I can get to that on Saturday. That's the plan. And then Sunday will be Animorphs 40, because I am keeping to my Sunday Animorphs schedule, which is going very well. I haven't had to start filming them again yet, and I think that's when it might all fall apart. And I also want to get to, it's behind one of these, but I want to get to This Poison Heart, because I want to do a reread of that for no particular reason other than that the sequel is coming out, and I think I might want to read the sequel. I just need to do a bit of a refresher first to make that decision. If I don't get to that, I'm probably not going to carry it over, I'll just leave it for now. The only new release left on my list is The Blood Traitor, which I have already talked about in a somewhat negative light. But if you did want to pick up a YA trilogy, let me give you the gist of what the Prison Healer series is about. Book 1, we are in the biggest prison in all of the lands, Zalandov, and our main character is the prison healer at that place. She has been brought there since she was a child. She's not technically a criminal, but her father was imprisoned for collaborating with the rebels, and so she's there, and basically their prison system is messed up. And at one point, the rebel queen, who has been, lost and being a rebel for many years, is brought to the infirmary, and they say she's going to face the trials of the ordeals, which are elemental trials that, in theory, if you pass them, you are pardoned, but for anyone who does not have elemental magic... Excuse me? One sec. Anyone who does not have elemental magic, they will just die. And obviously our main character picks up those trials and the series goes on from there. I think that my biggest disappointment with the series is that it's written about prisons, and a lot of things about the prison system are similar to things that we have today. It's very, very much a fantasy prison, but there are some things about just incarceration that are always the same regardless of fantasy or reality. But it doesn't really get into the criticism of prisons and why they don't work. It's just sort of like, this is a bad place. And you're like, well, yeah, I know, but are we going to talk about why and how to fix that and how to solve that problem? No, not really. I think it would have been more interesting and have a bit more substance and be a bit less generic if it had done that, but it didn't. Overall, I read the first one because I had a review copy of it. I read the second one because I liked how book 1 ended. I thought it was an interesting ending, and I was like, this is a cheesy YA time, I'll go for it. And then I read book 3 because I'd read 2 books and I'm a completionist. And I think overall, I would say if you're interested, read book 1 and see how you feel. If you absolutely love book 1 with all of your being, read books 2 and 3. If you're so-so on book 1, just leave it there. I just want a trilogy that sticks the landing. That's what I want to talk about. Trilogies that stick the landing. New ones. I want them, please and thank you. I feel also like, much like last week, I've been finishing a lot of series lately, which has been really, really good. But also, when they're not feeling successful towards the end, you don't get as much satisfaction out of it. Right, I have to give Luna a whole lot of pets, and I also have to get back to work, possibly in that order. So I shall speak to you soon. What have you been reading? What have you been up to? Let me know down in the comments below. You'll know I always love hearing what you're reading. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord if you're that way inclined. Nothing makes me feel more loved and appreciated than my patrons over on Patreon who support the channel and make videos like this possible. Thank you so much to all of you. If you would like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. After that, I finished Animorphs 39? 40? I can't be on 40 already. I think it's 39. 3 if you count the content. I'm in the middle of 2 things. 3 if you count the content. And maybe that's not what it's meant to do, but I think it would have been more interesting and perhaps had a bit more substance and be less of a... Excuse me.